The other day, I had a long overdue chat with my buddy GPT about one of my favorite things to cook on earth, the whole roasted chicken. From the naive wet brining days to baking soda, to gelatine, to separating the skin from the flesh, every single chicken I've ever roasted, every single method I've explored and I wanted to explore. And together, we decided this is how we do it. So this could potentially be the final episode of our search for the crispiest whole roasted chicken. Let's do it. So first and foremost, we are going to once again undress the chicken because that just gives us so much more real estate to work with. But before we do that, we're going to season the inside of the bird just to give it a bit more even seasoning. So in total, like most of my recipes, we're using 0.6% salt to the chicken's weight, and we're just gonna salt the inside a tiny bit because the rest will go into the winning mixture that we settled on after we've undressed the chicken. Perfect. Now, even on camera, I forgot how many birds we've undressed, but today I'll do it slowly and narrate every step to share some of the things I've learned from undressing these birds. So, first things first, we remove the wings. Now, we start to separate the skin from the flesh very gently. So today, my butcher has done a wonderful, wonderful job maintaining as much skin as possible without puncturing anything. So the width of the opening, logically, would be smaller than the width required to go through the two wings. What I've learned is, once we've loosened everything, the most beneficial thing to do to prevent a lengthwise tear is that we continue to trim crosswise at the bottom, because we know the overhanging skin would cover the bottom anyway, so we could afford to trim this off quite a bit. This is definitely not a weekday meal project, by the way. So we trim off some of the excess from the top, and like I said earlier, we cut the bottom half lengthwise. And you do this bit by bit so that you can be on the careful side. Now, once we've opened this up and we're ready to undress the wings, lately I've changed my approach to how I attack the wing drums, because I know eventually I would take them off before putting the dress back on. A much more fail-proof approach is to remove them now, once I've loosened the skin. This way, we can even keep some of the flesh, which would prevent the skin from forming a hole after roasting. So, just like how you would normally take off the wing joint, you wiggle and you find the joint here, and we jam our knife in. Now, once you're in, we cut around the whole joint. Once you've cut around the whole joint, you grab the joint, you turn the bird, and we push. Now, the whole bone came out, but the skin is still intact on the other side, which is exactly what we want. You pull one wing drum out, flesh and skin protected on the other side. And we do the same here. Wiggle, find the joint, jam your knife in. Once you're in, cut around the joint. You grab, you press. Once you're down, we pull. Once again, flesh and skin intact on the other side. Whole bone, clean, comes out. You pull. So now, we very carefully follow the skin, pulling off any sinews along the way. Once the wing is off, you would need to make one cut on each side. You basically want the skin to follow the rest of the skin. You put your knife in and you separate the sinew, and that's it. Same goes the other side. You grab hold of the skin, knife goes in, and once the arms are out, you're practically done. There are some sticky membranes in the middle between the two sides of the breast. You could either pull them with your fingers, or you could just make a small incision to help you get through. Once we get to the oysters, I stop for the back because this part is what's going to stabilize the chicken for us. Now, one optional step for the aesthetics, we're gonna trim off the excess neck, just so that once it's roasted, you don't have a piece of neck sticking out. And now we have a very, very beautiful chicken, fully undressed. So, of course, once the bird is undressed, removing the wishbone is the easiest task on earth. We find the inverse V and we simply scrape to reveal the wishbone. Once the wing drums are removed, the wishbone becomes much easier to remove. Now, once the wishbone's out, let's talk about our first mixture. First up, we have the remainder of our 0.6% salt. This, like the salt we've already applied, would season the bird and with time, break down the protein fibers into shorter amino acid strands, massively improving its moisture retention capabilities. Now, to that, we have the baking powder, which for most people who are into roasting chicken knows, changes the pH level, particularly for the skin, helping the chicken brown better. If you were to apply this outside, it will also increase the surface area for browning, but we have something better outside. So this will be mixed with the salt. We're using a 3:1 ratio, by the way. 3 parts salt, 1 part baking powder. And to that, we're going to add some gelatine powder. About 3 grams per kilo of chicken. So in this case, a 2 kilo chicken, 6 grams of powdered gelatine. This would help with the browning, as we've discussed in so many of our other videos. But anything more than this, the gelatine powder would not bloom. Now, we'll give this a thorough mix. And we season our bird. So, nothing we've done so far is that out of the ordinary compared to our previous recipes. But now, the fun begins. We're going to introduce the first moisture remover. In this case, the cornstarch. We are going to dust a layer of cornstarch before we put the dress back on. This way, we'll prevent a significant amount of moisture that will be released during the roasting process from going towards the skin. So we have a much better shot of keeping the skin crispy. And we're using cornstarch now and not potato starch because they have a much better moisture absorption capability. So here we go. And this will also help the skin bind with the flesh much better when we carve. The part here between the leg and the breast, it's what I call the soggy zone. So be a bit generous with cornstarch there. This moisture often gets trapped there. You know what, a pastry chef might be really good at roasting chicken. Brilliant. Now, just to avoid lumps, we grab a clean plate, dust off as much as we can, and now we put the dress back on. And we stretch the skin for the leg to make sure they have full contact with the cornstarch and the salt. I mean, if I didn't tell you, would you know that this bird was at one point naked? Now, we introduce the final powder. What's going to A, help the skin get crispy, and B, help the skin maintain crispy. We have some potato starch. For anyone who's made chicken karaage or Korean fried chicken would know, they often yield the crispiest fried chicken. Since it will be very difficult to oil the chicken after dusting the layer of potato starch, we're going to apply a very thin layer of vegetable oil or any high smoke point oil now to the surface of the bird, so that this would help the initial even browning and will also help the potato starch stick to the surface of the chicken. Now this time we really need to dust. Now, before we turn this over, we're going to switch the baking tray with a wire rack to minimize lumps. You see how the wing drums worked out? It filled the gap and plumped up the breast, making it harder to overcook. Now, the potato starch and the cornstarch together would help dry out the skin, making it primed to get crispy. Perfect. Now, this beauty goes into the fridge uncovered for at least 1 day and up to 3 days. Of course, we're going to go the maximum, during which all the hard work we've just done would start to do their magic. And in 3 days, the crispiest whole roasted chicken. I'll see you then. All right, after 3 days in the fridge, this is what we have. I was slightly concerned about the potato starch not being fully absorbed. Had a chat with my buddy GPT, was reassured that it's okay. But we have too much on the line, so I'm taking executive decision, just using dry paper towel to tap this slightly, making sure the starch is sticking to the skin. Otherwise, we'd be making potato starch crisps on top of the chicken skin instead of making crispy chicken skin. All right, I think I'm happy. Now, before going into the oven, we transfer this to a V-rack just to elevate it a bit to help the thighs and the bottom brown better. Now, to the roasting tray, we're going to add the first of our 2 moisture eliminators. In this case, just Thai jasmine rice. Uncooked rice, that is. I want every single unit of moisture that comes out of the chicken to be absorbed immediately. I do not want to see 1 unit of steam. And just like one of our previous recipes, we eliminate moisture from within. So here we have some croutons, just because I didn't have enough time for baguette to get stale. These are by definition dry. So we add as much croutons inside as possible. We're not adding rice inside just because carving would be a mess if we did that. These will not be tasty, by the way, so use cheap stale bread. Cheap rice. The bread will also protect the breast from the inside, which helps even cooking a bit. But today we're solving for skin. If it works, we have a lifetime ahead to explore even cooking. So, clear and achievable objective, a la Mad Dog Mattis. We're not trussing the bird because trussing is there to help even cooking, not to help crispy skin. Once you've trussed the bird, you can forget about these parts getting crispy. Now, I've maxed out the oven an hour ago with a pizza stone at the bottom just to help even browning. This thing now goes into the oven for 20 minutes. Then we'll introduce our last secret weapon. I'll see you then. All right, after 20 minutes, chicken comes out. I'm gonna smoke a bit. Yep, that's a good sign. Good news is we've made crispy rice, which will definitely top up, but the skin is looking really good. Now, we're going to apply what ChatGPT eloquently coined the Maillard reaction enhancer, a thin layer of honey in which the sugar content would react with the amino acid strands from the protein from the chicken, giving us more meaty flavors and better browning. So, very thin layer, and working while it's really hot. You can feel certain parts are already extremely crispy. Bear in mind that sugar content burns, so don't go too crazy. This would also help us get rid of whatever potato starch that did not bind with the skin. Brilliant. We top up the rice. And we lower the oven down to 190 to not burn the honey and finish cooking the chicken while further browning the skin. And this, depending on the size of the chicken or the oven, could take anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes. And we're gonna probe it. The moment the breast hits 60, the chicken has to come out because the residual heat will bring it up to 67, the upper limit we're willing to tolerate. So, I'll see you in 10 to 15 minutes. All right, after about 15 minutes, the chicken's ready. Look at this beautiful thing, oh my God. How beautiful is that? Very, very promising. All right, we're gonna let this rest for at least 10 minutes, then we'll carve. All right, as usual, because we're talking about crispy skin, chicken gets its own mic. Ready? The croutons really did its job. Not much liquid came out, just a bit of oil. How beautiful is that? Now, let's do it. Perfect. Goes back to rest. All right. Shall we? Beautiful. Moist, crispy. Let's give it a try. I must say, I was slightly worried when I was tapping it earlier. I thought, oh, not as crispy as some of the other recipes sounded. But the reason why it wasn't when you tap on the outside is the chicken and the cornstarch beneath the chicken has formed a thicker than usual crust, making instead of the thin crust in parts of the roasted chicken you normally get. So this whole thing has a wonderful bite and a wonderful texture that is quite different. Moist flesh, of course, that's mostly due to the brining of the salt. As you can see, the gelatine has really combined with the skin and you can't really see any visible cornstarch anymore. And that's the sound you can hear. And look at this, it's a much thicker crust somehow, not just from the chicken skin itself. And it melts in your mouth, kind of like the neck skin they serve as a starter for Peking duck, if you've ever had Peking duck. I think this is wonderful. Definitely the best skin texture I've had from any roasted chicken. It's not papery, it's not leathery, it's not thin, it has body to it. The delayed application of honey as a Maillard reaction enhancer is perfect. It's a wonderful, wonderful recipe. Of course, the pursuit for crispy skin whole roasted chicken is a lifelong journey. So as good as this is, I'm pretty sure this is not the last episode of the series, but it's probably the best episode. And I really, really, really hope you enjoyed and you would try it once. Wow. It's really, 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 really good.